Okay, we are live. Hello, good evening, and welcome back to the Law Entrance YouTube channel. Today, we have another session on logical reasoning. We'll be discussing the syllabus of logical reasoning. We'll be discussing your roadmap for the next few months in order to prepare for logical reasoning, and we will be discussing how can you begin your preparation in the most effective manner. So, let me just quickly share my presentation with you all, and then we'll start. Okay, so we are talking about Introduction to Logical Reasoning for CLAT 2026 batch. People who might be starting their preparation right now or would start probably next month. This would be very useful for most of those. Not just CLAT, but also ALET, also SLAT, and all the other law entrance exams. Logical reasoning as a subject forms the part of all of these law entrance exams. So let's see what all do we need to do with respect to logical reasoning. Firstly, let's look at the syllabus. This is what the CLAT website says, that each passage will be followed by one or more questions that would be requiring you to recognize an argument, its premises, and conclusion. Then you would have to identify the arguments set out in the passages, critically analyze the patterns of reasoning, assess conclusions, find how conclusions may be strengthened, weakened as a consequence of alteration in premise, infer what allows from the passage, and apply these inferences to new situations. Then, of course, there is drawing relationships and analogies, identifying contradictions, equivalence, and assessing effectiveness of arguments. Now, let's look at what exactly is the composition of the section. So there are 24 odd questions which are spread out across four passages. These are four passages which could be from different subject areas. It could be from economics, it could be from literature, it could be from a poem, it could be from a finance article, it could be from an environment based article, it could be anything, right? And then there would be six questions, five to six questions each on each of these passages. And what are these questions about? These questions could be from main idea of the passage, it could be strengthening or weakening the argument, it could be assumption in the argument, it could be what is the inference from the argument, what is a flaw in the reasoning, then parallel structure based questions, logical corollary based questions, fact inference judgment based questions, degree of falsity based questions, statement and conclusion based questions, statement and assumption based, conditional logic based, strong weak argument based, cause and effect based, course of action based. Syllogism is a different sort of I would say category of questions which are not usually paragraph based but based on certain statements. We'll look at them as well probably in the next few classes. But that is what is the syllabus of the logical reasoning section. Now that we understand what is the syllabus like, we should understand what should our roadmap for logical reasoning look like. Good evening, Priyanshi. Welcome to the stream. So, roadmap for logical reasoning, right? First of all, why is logical reasoning even important to study from CLAT perspective in the first place? Not just because it forms a major chunk of the syllabus, but also because it is helpful in the other three sections as well. Helpful in total four sections. Why do I say helpful in four sections? Because in the English section, you are required to apply logic in a lot of questions in order to reach to the right answer. Same is the case with GK based questions in CLAT. We all know that if you guys would have seen the paper of GK 2025, which we'll discuss tomorrow at 3 p.m., so don't miss out on that as well. In that paper, most of the questions, I would say 80% of the questions were logical reasoning based questions where the answers could be found out from the passage rather than based on your memory, rather than based on what you have studied for GK. So that was quite a new surprise. We saw that in the 2024 paper as well, but it was even more prevalent in the 2025 paper. So what does that tell you? That tells you a trend that CLAT is now leaning towards GK passages which probably require lesser of prior information but more of application of logical reasoning skills. Now, in no way I am saying that you should focus less on GK. I'm just saying that having a better grip on logical reasoning would definitely help you solve these kind of GK questions in a faster and more accurate manner. So English is done, GK is done. Then legal reasoning, we all know that CLAT specifically says that you do not require prior legal knowledge in order to solve questions of legal reasoning. You would just require the knowledge of application of certain principles to a fact-based situation, right? But is that true? No, that's not entirely true. You do require a fair bit of legal knowledge, a fair bit of legal GK. But apart from that, the exercise of applying principle to fact is particularly a logical reasoning based exercise, right? You understand there is a principle, you understand how it operates, then you read the facts and you see how the principle applies to the facts and you answer questions basis on that. So a purely logical exercise. So what I'm trying to establish here is that logical reasoning would not only help you in the logical reasoning section, which it of course would, but also help you in the English section, in the GK section, and in the legal section, which makes it more than 80% of the paper. So becomes a very critical section from that perspective. This is not just for CLAT but also for ALET and SLAT, right? Now, next, the reason why we are discussing the roadmap for logical reasoning is because it's a structured process. There is a method to this particular subject which you need to follow. I'm not saying this is the only method, but if you study it in a method, then things become smoother, things become easier. Okay. Now, when we talk about the reasoning section, all of us saw there was a surprise in today's paper. What was the surprise? There was a surprise section of analytical reasoning in the CLAT paper. Now, what exactly is analytical reasoning and how is it different from critical reasoning? Let's talk a little bit about that. So, when you talk about critical reasoning, you critically analyze, or some people also call this verbal reasoning, and this is non-verbal reasoning. Why verbal reasoning and non-verbal reasoning? What is verbal? Verbal is essentially working on words, working on paragraphs, working on sentences, and how they operate, and what can you draw from these paragraphs and sentences, these words, these verbal reasoning paragraphs. So that is why your critical reasoning, also called as verbal reasoning, forms a major chunk of the CLAT paper. Historically has been forming a huge chunk of the CLAT paper, but we saw a deviation in the CLAT 2025 paper where a puzzle was asked, a circular reasoning puzzle, which was sort of a very controversial question which the questions on which were wrong. They were framed wrongly is what I'm trying to say. And but that puzzle lies in the domain of analytical reasoning, right? What is analytical reasoning? Where a pure analytical application of mind is required. There is less involvement of word, there's less involvement of using your English skills or your verbal skills. It is non-verbal reasoning, right? What are some topics which are asked in analytical reasoning or verbal reasoning? Let's talk about them. So a few of the topics which we have are syllogisms, which I was just mentioning. That would be an example of analytical reasoning rather than verbal reasoning. What are syllogisms? Syllogisms are basically drawing conclusions based on Venn diagrams, right? We'll talk about syllogisms in detail when we have an exclusive class, but questions somehow look like this. Let's say sum A are B, and you have to draw it on a, let's say, visual Venn diagram. And on the basis of that, you need to draw conclusions. So how do you draw sum A or B? You draw an A as a circle, and you draw a B as a circle overlapping A. So this represents that sum A or B. This area represents that sum A or B. On the basis of this statement and on the basis of this diagram which you draw, you would have certain conclusions which would be given. For example, based on sum A or B, can you say that sum A or not B? Now, people who do not have a clear understanding of syllogisms might say that yes, this is a true conclusion, because if some A are B, you can conclude that some A are not B. But people who have studied syllogisms know that this is not a correct conclusion. You cannot say some A are not B based on some A are B. But more on this later when we study syllogisms in detail. I'll explain the logic behind all of these things. But syllogisms is one of the categories of questions which are asked within analytical reasoning. And even if CLAT does not ask it, it is very frequently asked in exams like ALET, exams like SLAT. So you need to anyhow prepare for them, right? Okay. That being said, what are other topics in the domain of analytical reasoning? Let's look at them. There is, of course, puzzles. What are puzzles? Puzzles are essentially, uh, how do I explain puzzles? Puzzles are a question which is based on certain variables which are arranged in a manner which is given in the question, they could be arranged circularly in a circular pattern. They could be arranged in a square pattern. They could be arranged in a linear pattern in a building. They could be arranged in a horizontal pattern. What is they? They could be anything. They could be people, they could be cars, they could be animals, it could be anything. So for example, they could say that A, B, C, D are four people seated around a circular table, and A is sitting beside B, and D is sitting between B and C. So where would D come? D would come here, right? This is a very rudimentary, very basic example of how a circular arrangement puzzle looks like. And then they would ask you questions based on this, that who is sitting on the left of C. So you would say that left of C is A and not D, because they're facing inwards. So A would be the right answer to that one. So this is how puzzles of circular arrangement look like. One was also present in the 2025 paper. Then you have puzzles where people could be seated around a square table, a rectangle table, or people could be, on multiple floors of a building. People could be standing in a line, according to their height, according to their weight, whatever. There could be n number of variables in a puzzle, and we'll practice them throughout our journey of logical reasoning. We'll practice puzzles as well. So puzzles is another thing. So Silogs is one, puzzles is one. Then what else do you have? You also have questions on number series. Now, what exactly are number series? Very simple. You are given a set of few numbers. For example, 1, 2, okay, let's do it like this: 1, 4, 9, 16. What would come next in this particular series? Can anyone of you guess? In this number series, what would be the next number which would fill in this gap? Any guesses? People who are watching live? No guesses? So this is a pattern which is following the squares of numbers. So 1 square would be 1, 2 square would be 4, 3 square would be 9, 4 square would be 16. So similarly, what would be next? Next would be 5 square. That makes it 25. So these kind of questions are called number series question. Now, Adrija has answered 25. That's correct. So apart from number series, there could also be alphanumeric series, which is just a variation to number series. There is a combination which also includes letters along with numbers. So to give you another example, let's say that 1A, then 2B, then 3C, then 4D. Then obviously the right answer to next one would be 5C, because the number are increasing by 1, the letters are increasing by 1. Now, there could be so many variations formed out of these number series and alphanumeric series. We'll practice those variations when we discuss this topic in detail. But yes, that is one. So we have discussed syllogisms, we have discussed puzzles, we have discussed number series and alphanumeric series. What else is there in analytical reasoning? There are questions based on calendars and clocks. Now, what are calendars and clocks based questions? They were asked in quite few numbers in the SLAT exam this year, both the shifts. So calendar based questions are very simple. There's a certain formula, there's a certain technique in which you can calculate the day which is falling on a certain date. So for example, what's today is it's 20th December, right? So I might ask you, what is the day on 20th December 2024? Now, you can obviously answer it because you know today's day is Friday. But what if I ask you, what was the day on 20th December 1989? Can you answer that without referring to a calendar? Yes, there is a way to answer these sort of questions. So that is what you learn in calendar type of questions. This is a very simple example. Another example which I can recall from the SLAT questions was, let's say you are born on this date, 20th December 1989. Between 20th December 1989 and between 20th December 2024, how many times 20th December fell on a Monday? You have to tell the number of times your birthday, that is 20th December 1989, fell on a Monday. So these are sort of advanced variations of calendar based questions. Similarly, there are questions on clocks. For example, the minute hand is on this, the hour hand is on this. How much time would it take to reach at that particular slot of time? So many variations in clock based questions as well. So calendars and clocks is another thing which is asked in analytical reasoning. Apart from that, there are your arithmetic based concepts like time, speed, and distance, right? A person is going from place A to B, which is 10 kilometers apart. He is going at a speed of 10 kilometer per hour. How much time would he take to reach from A to B? Very simple. He would take 1 hour, right? So this is a very simple example. Obviously, the questions would not be this direct, but questions on time, speed, and distance. Then questions on time and work. What is time and work? Time and work is essentially you're given questions like, for example, A takes 5 days to build a building. B takes 7 days to build a building. If A and B work together, how much time would it take them to build this building together? So obviously it would be less than 5 days or 7 days, but how many days? That is what you need to answer. So these are time and work based questions, many variations on this as well. Then a variation of time, speed, and distance is questions of boats, specifically upstream and downstream questions, right? Questions of upstream, questions of downstream. Now here the questions are pretty simple, that there is a boat which is going, let's say, downstream. The speed of the boat in still water is, let's say, 5. The speed of the stream is 2. Then how much time would the boat take to reach from point A to point B, which is, let's say, 10 kilometer, if it's going downstream? So in downstream, you just simply add the speed of the water to speed of the boat, which makes it 7. So speed is 7, distance is 10. You can find out the time it would take, right? So these are variations of time, speed, and distance. Apart from that, what are the other categories of questions? There are questions on blood relations. What are blood relations? Basically, relationships between family members. How exactly is a person related to others? So, for example, we all know the terms like mother, father, cousin, nephew, grandfather, grandmother, sister, wife, husband, right? So, they might ask that is father's wife son is what? So आपके पापा की वाइफ का बेटा आपको क्या होगा? ब्रदर होगा. Simple as that, right? So these kind of questions, where you need to find the relationship between two people. So pretty simple, pretty straightforward. Then there are questions of directions. Now, what do we mean by directions? The four directions: north, south, east, and west. So they could say something like A started walking 10 kilometers in the north direction, then he turned right and he walked for 5 kilometers, then he turned left and walked for another 5 kilometers, then he turned right, then he turned, let's say, left again and moved for other 7 kilometers. Now, which direction is A facing? So obviously we know that he is facing the west direction. So these kind of questions are asked in the topic of directions, direction sense. And these are the primary topics. Of course, there would be some miscellaneous topics as well, which can be asked, but majorly these type of questions form the crux of the analytical reasoning section of your law entrance exams. So let me list them down once again for you guys. There is syllogism based on Venn diagram. There is puzzles of all sorts. There is series, number series and alphanumeric series. There is blood relations. There is directions. There is time, speed, distance. There is boards. There is calendars. There is clocks. There is what else? What else am I missing? Time and work. And yeah, that's pretty much it. These are the primary type of questions which are asked in the analytical reasoning section. The CR section we have already discussed. The primary type of questions are questions based on assumptions, questions based on conclusions, questions based on inferences, questions based on strengthening and weakening in a particular argument or identifying strong and weak arguments, question based on flaw in the reasoning, parallel reasoning. All of those sort of questions are asked in the critical reasoning part of the paper, which forms the major chunk of the CLAT exam and a good substantial chunk of the ALET exam as well as the SLAT exam. Now, coming back to the roadmap of how should you start preparing for the logical reasoning section, I would suggest that the first step would be start with solving the past year question papers of CLAT and ALIT. SLAT के available नहीं होते online, वरना मैं SLAT भी बोलता, but CLAT and ALIT से start. Start with the recent one, start with 2025, then move on to 2024 and go till 2023. Solve these three past year papers. The logical reasoning section I'm talking, I'm not saying the full paper, although that could be another approach you could follow by solving the full paper. But at least the logical reasoning section, if you're beginning your prep for the logical reasoning section, and see how much are you able to score out of those 24 odd marks, or however lengthy that particular section is. Time yourself, see how much time you are taking in solving these 24 questions. Try to do them in less than 30 minutes if possible, because given unlimited amount of time, most of you would get most of the questions correct, but the real deal is solving them in the pressure of limited time, which would be ideally 30 minutes. So in 30 minutes, put a timer of 30 minutes and try to solve papers of 25, 24, 23, the logical reasoning section, and see what exactly are the results. Are you finding it easy? Are you finding it moderate? Are you finding it difficult? And within that, which type of questions are you finding easy? Which type of questions are you finding moderate? Which type of questions are you finding difficult? Which questions went right in the first go? Which questions bothered you between two options? You need to do a very deep critical analysis of your attempt to understand where do you exactly stand in terms of your preparation. Obviously, it's completely okay if you even score, let's say, 5 marks or 10 marks or 12 marks out of the 24 marks. That's absolutely acceptable, absolutely all right. What's not acceptable is you not doing this exercise. So once you are done with this exercise, the next step would be, of course, consolidating your syllabus at one particular place and then starting with one topic. Of course, we would be starting with the topic wise series very soon. I think the next week we'll be beginning that. So of course we would also be going along with you with this syllabus, so you can follow us along on YT channels, as well as you can either enroll with CL or whichever brand you want to. I'm not endorsing, but yes, it's good to have a structure to your preparation. It's good to have a timetable where you would dedicate, let's say, 1 or 2 hours to logical reasoning as a subject. I'm not saying per day. Abhi ke liye for per week you should ideally allocate 2 to 3 hours to logical reasoning. That would be more than sufficient for the initial few weeks. And as and when we progress with our months and with our preparation, you would slowly and slowly increase your number of hours. So the next step after solving the PYQs would be picking up a topic which would form your foundation of logical reasoning, which could be, for example, decoding logical arguments, right? Understanding what are logical arguments, understanding what is a premise, understanding what is an assumption, understanding what is a conclusion. These would be the first basic building blocks of your logical reasoning and your understanding of critical reasoning. इसके बाद you can move to the concept of inference. उसके बाद you can move to concepts like strengthening and weakening, and then moving on to a little more advanced concepts. Meanwhile, along with that, also keep solving topic tests or sectional tests if possible, because that would keep on helping you in testing how exactly are you applying your theories, your learnings to actual questions. There are so many resources online which you can refer to in order to practice these questions. You would find n number of questions on CL's portal as well. So make good use of these sections, these tools, because logical reasoning at the end of the day is all about practice. The more you practice logical reasoning, the better you get at it, and the more accurate you get at it. So there's no other way rather than practicing questions. There's no shortcut around it. Once you get through the concept, practice it so much that you become the best at it, and you are so good that you can explain it to someone else in an equally effective manner. That's the best way to grasp a concept, because if you want to teach it, you need to know it very thoroughly, because if a person asks a question, you should be equipped to answer it, right? So know it as good as you are capable enough to explain a 5-year-old what exactly these concepts mean. So उतना अच्छा आपको आना चाहिए इन concepts के बारे में. Now, talking about the strategy aspect of it, how exactly are we going to approach this section in the exam? Those things would come a little later in our journey, but we'll definitely get to that. कि logical reasoning में आपको उसको section को कब attempt करना है, उस section में कितने question attempt करने हैं, difficult questions कैसे identify करने हैं, how do we plan around our मॉक टेस्ट दैट लॉजिकल रीजनिंग सेक्शन को आपको किस सेक्शन के बाद करना चाहिए, किस सेक्शन से पहले करना चाहिए, लॉजिकल रीजनिंग सेक्शन में पहले क्वेश्चंस पढ़ने चाहिए पहले या फिर पैसेज पढ़ना चाहिए. ऑल ऑफ दैट स्ट्रैटेजी बिट वुड कम अ लिटिल लेटर. For now, I want you guys to focus on building your concepts. Another good exercise which you could follow in order to improve your critical reasoning is reading the editorial. Now, this might sound a little strange that why are we required to read the newspaper editorial in order to work on our logical reasoning? This is because of multiple reasons. The first reason is the passages, the paragraphs which you find in logical reasoning questions very often come from newspaper editorials, very often come from these academic sources. And if you are well versed and well accustomed to reading such languages, you will not find the language in the passage very difficult to deal with. Most of us are not used to reading on different types of domain areas. In newspaper editorials, you would be finding topics which could be about economy, which could be about polity, which could be about science, which could be about international affairs, which could be about, let's say, environment, which could be about government schemes, which could be about technology, which could be about AI, which could be about law. So n number of themes, n number of concepts, n number of ideas are discussed in editorials, and in a very lucid, in a very good language, which gives you multiple perspectives to understand a issue from different lenses. For example, topics such as okay, for example, Abhi, there's a debate going on Places of Worship Act, right? That which temples are mosques, which mosques are temple, controversial issue. But when you read editorials on these topics, they are usually objective and neutral in their nature. They don't take a particular side that this should happen, but they give you context from various lenses. What is the historical lenses? When did the emergence of mosques come to India? When, how historic are the temples in India? So it gives you a historical perspective. It gives you a politics perspective, that how are political parties using this issue to further their political agenda and building narratives. It gives you a social perspective, that how are people mobilized towards these issues and how easy it is to influence people on the basis of religion. It also gives you, let's say, a economic perspective, because who are the people behind these litigations, because litigation is expensive, moving to court for cases is expensive. So who is funding this process? So all of these things you can get from editorials, and they help you understand how to think. They build your critical thinking abilities, they build your reasoning skills. So that is why I'm saying that reading editorial is very, very important for a law aspirant. We also do our Hindu analysis, not trying to plug in, but yes, that is helpful. That would be helpful if you attend the Hindu analysis at 3 p.m. as well, which happens on the weekdays. So yeah, that's pretty much it with regards to your roadmap for the next few months of logical reasoning. We'll be starting with the topic wise discussion on different topics, starting with what exactly is a logical argument and how to understand a logical argument. So stay tuned to those classes as well. And if you have not liked this particular video till now, do drop a like on this video and do share it with your friends. Do subscribe to the channel and all of those things. Till then, that's all from my side. I'll see you all in another class. Tata, bye bye. Take care. Signing off. I'll see you in the next one.